The clock hadn't yet struck 5:00 a.m. when the first sound echoed through Wellington Military Academy's north wing. Not the reveille trumpet or marching boots, but the gentle whisper of cartwheels against polished floors. Thump, glide, thump. The rhythm was so familiar that motion sensors activated almost by instinct, as if the building itself had learned to expect this daily pilgrimage. Behind the cart walked Elena Martinez, her silhouette cutting through the pale fluorescent glow like a ghost from another time. What secrets does a janitor's uniform hide? Stay with us to discover how one woman's silence spoke louder than any medal. Elena wore the same faded custodial coveralls every dawn. Cuffs neatly folded, jacket draped over narrow shoulders, and a weathered baseball cap that had seen too many sunrises. No name tag adorned her chest, no department insignia marked her territory. Just utilitarian fabric worn thin in places where something else, something heavier, had once rested. Her stride carried a peculiar cadence, not hurried, but measured. Each footfall landed heel to toe with the precision of someone who had once counted steps in places where miscounting meant everything. She moved like conserved energy in human form, every gesture calculated for maximum efficiency. The mop danced in her hands with choreographed perfection, bucket positioned for balance, wrists turning in smooth figure eights that left the floor streak-free and gleaming. No music played in her ears, no small talk filled the silence. She filled the hallway with something far more profound: competence. Most cadets barely noticed her. They shuffled past half-awake uniforms, half-buttoned, offering perfunctory nods if their eyes happened to meet hers. More often, they simply let the woman with the stiff back fade into the periphery of their warrior-in-training narrative. But what happens when someone finally looks closer? When the veil of anonymity begins to slip. Cracks in the facade. The first hint came on a Thursday morning when Cadet Marcus Chen fumbled a practice cartridge from his pocket. The brass casing skittered across the freshly mopped floor like a metallic cricket. Before Marcus could stoop to retrieve it, Elena bent with fluid motion, pinched the cartridge between thumb and forefinger, spun it once to check the primer, and returned it case mouth forward, exactly the way range officers teach proper ammunition handling. The entire movement took perhaps half a second, but Marcus blinked as if he'd witnessed sleet of hand. Where does a janitor learn to handle ammunition like a weapons instructor? More clues surfaced like breadcrumbs on a trail. When Sergeant Torres asked why she insisted on unscented cleaning solution instead of the Academy's standard lemon concentrate, Elena replied without looking up, "Citrus compromises focus. Soldiers should smell the environment, not be distracted by artificial scents." The response was clinical, tactical, the kind of insight that comes from experience, not training manuals. Stories of her resourcefulness drifted through supply channels. Maintenance Corporal Rodriguez once watched Elena reinforce a wobbling dining hall table using nothing but cardboard shims cut from ration boxes. Wouldn't budge a millimeter afterward, he told newcomers, tapping the surface for emphasis. That's field engineering precision. Yet these glimpses of hidden expertise rarely lasted long enough to coalesce into questions. Cadets rushed toward live fire drills, instructors barked orders, and Elena's silhouette receded back into the glow of corridor lights. But some observers are more persistent than others. Some refuse to let mysteries remain unsolved. The watcher at the window, Elena, always finished the eastern wing first. By 6:20 a.m., the tiles gleamed behind her like a mirror ribbon, and the Academy's first surge of noise hadn't yet penetrated the corridor's hush. She would pause at the hallway's end, where tall wire-reinforced glass overlooked the parade ground and its faded chalk grids. The window was warped with age, edges fogged with calcium deposits, but the view suited her perfectly. Distance that softened harsh edges and rendered every cadet a moving tactical diagram. One palm rested on the mop handle, the other on the knot of cloth draped over her shoulder like a field towel. Her breathing settled into an old rhythm. Inhale on the left foot, exhale on the right. Though she no longer marched anywhere. Below, platoon leaders ran assault and withdrawal drills. Staggered columns peeled left and right, Fire teams rushed to imaginary cover. Elena's gaze tracked the patterns with the intensity of a chess master analyzing gambits. Not fascinated, alert. When a tall cadet in the front rank brought his rifle up with hunched shoulders, she felt phantom recoil in her own joints. Stock position too high, he nodded silently. Weapon will climb, sight picture will drift. Sure enough, his muzzle climbed and his second blank round cracked over the target frame. Another cadet, a woman with dark braids tight under her helmet, arrived half a heartbeat late to every cover command. In theater, Elena thought, half a heartbeat is the width between life and a memorial plaque. She catalogued these lapses in an invisible ledger, not for gossip or complaint, but from habit. Once other lives had depended on her noticing such details before they cost blood. What battlefield had taught her to read tactical movements like sheet music? What ghosts did she see in every imperfect stance? The range revelation Thursday afternoons brought a different rhythm to Fort Wellington. After the last echo of drill commands faded, Elena would slip through the side gate marked authorized personnel only, approaching the guard shack with casual purpose. Any scheduled bookings for the 4:30 slot? She'd ask the duty guard, voice calm and even. Corporal Jenkins would flip through his register without hesitation. Nothing on record, ma'am. You need to use it? She'd nod, neither offering thanks nor explanation, and walk into the furthest, most secluded stall. Behind her, Jenkins would shrug and mutter, "Must want to take a crack at it." Inside lane 6, Elena would unzip a battered canvas tote with deliberate care. From it emerged a weathered Beretta M9, its once polished bluing worn to matte gray, and a fresh box of 9mm rounds. What happened next defied every assumption the Academy had made about their quiet custodian. Click. Ear protection on. Snap. Magazine loaded. Slide racked. No timers ticked. No instructors watched, yet each shot fell with mechanical precision. 3 rapid bursts. Brief pause. 2 more. Change of hands. Then a single round to the bullseye. 30 shots later, the paper silhouette hung riddled with 30 perfect holes, all nested within the tight confines of the innermost circle. She would field strip the pistol, clean every component until metal gleamed, and reassemble with the same ritualistic care. Without a backward glance, she'd gather her equipment and depart, leaving the pristine target untouched. But secrets, like smoke, have a way of escaping even the most careful containers. The viral moment the next morning, Cadet Tyler Brooks, known more for comedy than marksmanship, paused while retrieving training rifles. A target still hung in lane 6, its center obliterated by surgical precision. "Holy, who shoots like that?" he muttered. A passing guard replied with casual familiarity. "That was Mrs. Martinez yesterday afternoon. She borrowed the lane when it was free." Tyler's jaw dropped. "Wait, you mean the janitor?" The guard shrugged and moved on. By midday, Tyler's incredulous discovery had spread through the mess hall like wildfire. He stood on a bench, arms spread wide in mock heroic pose. "You want to see the sharpest shooter in this whole academy? It's the cleaning lady." Laughter erupted. Someone held an empty mop handle aloft, mimicking sniper stance. Another cadet called out, "Must be all that floor scrubbing, gives her laser focus." That evening, someone edited a slow-motion video with dramatic music, tagging it Silent Trigger, Janitor Ops. The clip racked up hundreds of views before anyone thought to remove it. Through it all, Elena carried on as though nothing had happened. When she passed the table of cadets still replaying the video, she offered only a polite sideways glance, no more than a flicker of acknowledgement. But humor has a way of curdling when it bumps against reality, and reality was about to reveal itself in ways no one expected. The performance, what began as harmless amazement, soon evolved into something uglier. By week's end, the Silent Trigger video had spawned a full theatrical production. As Elena emerged from the weapons locker Monday morning, 3 cadets straightened into mock military bearing. They huddled as she walked by, backs curved into exaggerated salutes, hands gripping imaginary mop handles like rifles, Sergeant Broomstick requesting clearance to engage the dust. One announced in a gravelly baritone, drawing laughter from his companions. The mockery had graduated from spontaneous joke to rehearsed performance, an insult dressed as theater. That afternoon, they'd propped a battered broom against the firing line fence. As Elena approached, one cadet swept it into his arms, strode forward in rigid posture, and pretended to sight down its length before dropping to one knee. Another had tucked a coffee sack scarf over his uniform to mimic Elena's worn shoulder towel. The third pantomimed loading ammunition from an invisible pouch. Their antics drew scattered applause from onlookers who either joined in or hurried past to escape the spectacle. Elena witnessed every detail, the bowing shoulders, each whisper of amusement. Yet she neither glared nor snapped. She simply continued her task, each mop stroke laying down a straight, wet band across concrete with mechanical precision. Her breathing remained quiet and even posture unchanged. But not everyone found the performance entertaining. Cadet Sarah Walsh, a second year with keen brown eyes, whispered to her companion, "I don't know who she really is, but the way she just kept going makes me feel like garbage." The laughter began to ring hollow. What had seemed like harmless fun started to feel like something else entirely, something that left a bitter aftertaste in the mouths of those with enough sense to recognize dignity under fire. They were mocking someone whose silence might have more meaning than their noise ever would. The warehouse incident. It was past noon when the Georgia sun pressed through dusty skylights, turning the equipment warehouse into a slow-moving furnace. Two supply clerks slid kettlebells onto new shelving while a forklift beeped in reverse near the loading dock. At the far end of the aisle, Elena bent into a steel weight rack whose front casters had snagged in a shallow concrete rut. The rack tilted forward like a wounded animal. She set her shoulders, planted both boots, and shoved. Metal squealed. The right side wheel lurched, then folded under the frame. A corner of angle iron bit through the canvas of her left glove, kissing the skin beneath with sharp precision. Instinct drove her weight backward as she bore down on the opposite handle, steadying the cage before it could topple. When it settled, she exhaled once, slow, quiet, keeping tremor from her breath the same way she'd once kept it from radio calls under fire. Across the aisle, Cadet Marcus Chen had been checking serial numbers on medicine balls. He heard the scrape, looked up, and saw the rack hanging above Elena like a guillotine about to drop. By the time his brain formed the word move, his body was already sprinting. He caught the far post with both hands, toes skidding on concrete as iron groaned, but stayed upright. Together, they eased the weight back to center. Marcus felt his pulse hammering as Elena's face, partly hidden by her cap's bill, remained unchanged except for a single bead of sweat running from temple to jaw. "You all right, ma'am?" he asked, breath coming hard. She gave the barest nod. "I'm fine." But when she reached for the top rail, crimson seeped through the frayed cotton of her glove. Marcus fumbled in his cargo pocket for adhesive bandage every cadet carried, offering it across the gap. Elena didn't refuse, yet she didn't take it immediately. Instead, she pushed her sleeve to the elbow to wipe blood on clean fabric before it could fall to the floor. Sunlight poured in at an angle then, bright and pitiless. For a heartbeat, it illuminated the inside of her forearm. Tan skin, lean muscle, a lattice of faint white scars. And just below the tricep, a tattoo Marcus had only seen in grainy PowerPoint slides. A rough-lined arrow pointing downward over spread wings. The worn insignia of Task Force Delta. Beneath it, block letters and two numbers, ink bleached almost gray by time. SMG 06-14. Elena rolled the sleeve back down, but the image stayed seared in Marcus's memory. He felt warehouse noise fade behind the rush of his own blood. Task Force Delta. Direct Action Units. Special Operations. The June training brief on urban warfare had featured a single archival photograph from Najaf, 2014. Call sign, Blackbird. Below it, a casualty list. One line had caught Marcus's attention because the instructor had paused over it. Staff Sergeant Miguel Martinez, KIA June 14, 2014. Martinez. Same surname. Same date. The pieces slammed together like a bolt driven home. Marcus saw the neat print on the memorial slide, the instructor's subdued voice, the blurred photo of a squad emerging from smoke. 5 survived, the legend had said. Delta NCO dragged them out, refused medevac, refused commendation. The file had been partially redacted. No one had mentioned her first name. Standing beside him, Elena flexed her injured hand once to gauge the cut. A line of red welled through the gauze she'd improvised from shop towel. Marcus managed to push the proper bandage forward. She accepted it, wrapping the strip with practiced efficiency, tails pulled square and flat. She might have been field dressing a wound on patrol, not taping a scrape in a climate-controlled warehouse. Marcus's gaze stayed on the sleeve that now hid the tattoo. Words crowded his mouth. Is that Task Force Delta? Are you Staff Sergeant Martinez's mother? Why are you here cleaning our floors? But none felt permitted. Elena finished the wrap, tore tape with her teeth, and pressed it into place. Only then did she meet his eyes. The look was level, unhurried, unreadable. No threat, no plea. Only the weight of experience far older than Marcus's 19 years. Don't ask, the eye said. Not here, not now. Marcus swallowed, took one step back, and nodded once in acknowledgement of an order never spoken. In that warehouse, surrounded by the ordinary tools of maintenance and training, Marcus had glimpsed something extraordinary. A warrior's mother, still standing guard over children who weren't her own. The night of discovery, Marcus lay flat on his bunk, boots still on, dorm lights already dark. Sleep was nowhere near. Against the low hum of air conditioning, he replayed every detail. The weight rack's jolt, the flash of red on Elena's glove. Sunlight catching that half-faded arrow, and the numbers beneath. SMG 06 to 14. The more he turned the image over, the less the woman with the mop looked like a janitor, and the more she resembled someone who had once moved through smoke-filled rooms with the same economic precision. He propped himself on an elbow and unlocked his phone, thumbing past memes and group chats until he found the PDF for Adaptive Combat Response. Search, Blackbird. There it was. Najaf, October 2014. Task Force Delta. 5 names under a photo so grainy it looked older than he was. He paused over the casualty list. SG Miguel Martinez, KIA 14 June 2014. His stomach tightened as if he'd missed a rung on a ladder. Curiosity became need. Marcus logged into the restricted training portal, fingers suddenly clumsy on keys. Blackbird survivors. 3 hits surfaced. 2 were flagged access denied. The third opened after long hesitation. Elena Martinez, TF Delta. Redacted, recovered full squad except 1 KA, SSG Miguel Martinez. Refused award. Withdrew after incident. File sealed per personal request. The words were clinical, almost gentle, yet they struck like physical blows. She'd carried everyone out except her own son. She'd turned down the medal they'd tried to pin over that hole in her heart, then asked the army to lock the file away where no one would disturb it. Marcus leaned back against cinder block, phone resting on his chest. The picture sharpened. Elena wiping blood from her arm with practiced calm. Elena's silent circuits at dawn. The way she watched live fire drills, correcting nothing aloud yet noting every mistake. It wasn't detachment. It was muscle memory. Battlefield reflexes lodged so deep she couldn't shed them. She wasn't sweeping floors to forget. She was surviving in the only quiet ground left to her. For the first time, Marcus saw her not as a stoic figure rolling mop water, but as a mother who had once lifted a stretcher bearing her own child. He imagined the moment medics zipped a bag around a body she had taught to shoot and salute. No interviews. No book deal. No lecture circuit. Just withdrawal into anonymity. a silent watch over kids who still had the luxury of complaining that PT started too early or coffee was too weak. His chest ached with a mixture of shame and awe. He heard again yesterday's jokes, the folks' heroic voice, the silent trigger clip, and each punchline felt like a boot grinding into gravel over that sealed file. Around midnight, Marcus rose and began cleaning his rifle under the bunk's faint reading light. Bolt, firing pin, chamber, each metallic click a quiet vow stitched into darkness. Some truths, once discovered, demand action. The question was, what kind of action honors both the truth and the person who kept it hidden? The salute Fort Wellington smelled of floor wax and ambition before sunrise. At 5:47 a.m., the big atrium outside administration looked identical to any other weekday. White fluorescence humming overhead, reflecting off buff terrazzo and glass display cases filled with dusty trophies. In one of those long, echoing corridors, Elena guided her cart from Wing B toward the main lobby. Same rhythm. Push, roll, squeak over the expansion joint, push again. Same faded utility jacket, same ball cap pulled low. Only the strip of gauze on her left hand broke the pattern. But this morning felt different. Something in the corridor's atmosphere had shifted half a minute, like a rifle whose sights had drifted slightly off true. At the corridor's mouth, Cadet Marcus Chen waited. He'd finished dawn PT early, sweat cooling under his grey t-shirt. Usually he jogged past with averted eyes, rushing to beat the shower line. Today he planted his boots square on the threshold and drew himself to parade rest. He watched her approach. The measured gait, controlled center of gravity, left arm held fractionally tighter to protect the fresh bandage. When she closed to 4 paces, he snapped to attention with movement that rang like a rifle bolt in the stillness. Hand to brow, spine locked. Morning, ma'am. The salute was impeccable. The honorific, a formal ma'am, not sir, not careless acknowledgement, was deliberate. No regulation required him to salute a civilian custodian. No instructor had prompted him. The salute came from a night spent reading redacted files and imagining streets on fire. Elena's cart rolled to a stop. She looked at the young man. Really looked. Long enough to register sincerity, and inclined her head a fraction. The barest acknowledgement a combat leader offers a peer rather than subordinate. Water sloshed softly in the mop bucket and stilled. She did not smile, did not speak, but something eased fractionally in her shoulders before she nudged the cart forward again. 3 cadets leaning against a vending machine outside the student mailroom. Ramirez, Harper, and Patel witnessed the exchange. Did Chen just snap to for the cleaning lady? Harper murmured. Ramirez lifted an eyebrow. Looks that way. None of them laughed. They couldn't articulate why, but Marcus's salute, crisp, unashamed, had reset the room's emotional barometer. Jokes felt suddenly juvenile, laughter ill-timed. The trio tracked the cart's slow progress. Water wheels squeaked. Chlorine lingered. Elena's bandaged hand rested lightly on the handle, but her posture radiated nothing of pain or age. She moved with unhurried certainty, someone who knew precisely how long it would take to cross any distance and how close danger might come before she reacted. When Marcus rejoined them, his face held no smirk, no explanation, only steady, thoughtful calm. Whatever had happened since yesterday had stripped irony from him like sandpaper. The others found themselves lowering their voices even after Elena had passed, each aware of an invisible line they suddenly hesitated to cross. Respect, Marcus realized, was contagious. Once it took root, it spread through simple observation. If someone like him could recognize something worth honoring, maybe others could too. The ripple effect this shift began almost imperceptibly, like temperature sliding a single degree before dawn. But within a week, every instructor on Fort Wellington's east side could feel it. Morning drill had always been loud. Boots slapping tile, cadets gossiping at parade rest, voices carrying while they waited for mess hall doors to open. Now the chatter thinned whenever cleaning cartwheels approached. At 6:30 sharp, As Elena moved down corridors with mop and bucket, conversations dropped to murmurs. Jokes that once landed at her expense never quite took shape. The cadet who might have pantomimed her measured walk found something urgent to read on the duty roster instead. Nobody issued orders, yet a pocket of stillness traveled with her, widening each day like ripples on calm water. Platoon sergeants noticed first. "Sound carries," one remarked, puzzled, when a squad filed past without usual horseplay. By midweek, the phenomenon had a nickname in the instructor-ready room: the hush. Cadets might not know why they lowered their voices, only that it felt wrong, disrespectful somehow, to treat the quiet woman in the cap as background noise. Major Patricia Ellis sat on concrete bleachers overlooking the parade square, clipboard balanced on her knee while companies rehearsed movement-to-contact drills. At 48, Ellis carried a lean frame and face weathered by equal measures sun and paperwork. She'd been tracking tempo and alignment when a small tableau at the walkway's far end caught her eye. Marcus Chen, stepping aside to let the janitor pass, then executing a formal textbook salute. No hesitation, no embarrassment. Ellis read body language instantly. This wasn't showing off. It was a junior soldier greeting a senior warrior. Elena answered with fractional acknowledgement, pure field courtesy. Ellis felt no surprise, only wondered what had finally peeled back the veil for these students. Wondered which detail, some scar, some line in a forgotten briefing, had rewritten the woman's shadow in their minds. 20 years earlier, during Operation Blackbird, Ellis had served as junior communications officer in the Tactical Operations Center 30 miles behind the line where the city burned day and night. She remembered the medevac bird that thumped onto the leads after dusk, tailboom bullet chewed, rotors throwing up acrid dust. She'd stepped out with stretcher detail and seen her first. Staff Sergeant Elena Martinez, gear hanging off her like lead weights, left sleeve dark with someone else's blood. In one hand, she'd clamped an M4's pistol grip. In the other, she'd clutched a single dog tag between thumb and forefinger, as if afraid the name might slip free and vanish in rotor wash. Miguel Martinez, the tag read. KIA early that afternoon. Ellis's job was to usher survivors to debrief. But the look in Elena's eyes, raw, hollow, ferociously steady, froze her long enough for another lieutenant to take her rifle. No one spoke. Some griefs arrived already explained. Ellis never saw her again after formal statements were sealed, though she'd tracked rumors, refused decoration, requested discharge, disappeared into civilian life. Years later, during her first week teaching at Fort Wellington, Ellis had recognized the same woman pushing a mop down Alpha Hall. Elena didn't acknowledge recognition, and Ellis didn't press. Combat veterans adopt their own borders. Trespass is rarely forgiven. Once, only once, Ellis had broken protocol. Last winter, she'd been reviewing midterm rubrics on a stone bench outside the lecture theater when Elena exited the supply stairwell. Their eyes met. Ellis rose, straightened unconsciously to parade rest, and dipped her head. The nod was small but carried freight of memories neither wanted unpacked. Elena returned the gesture, nothing more, and continued on. That was enough. Two old soldiers confirming the past without disturbing it. Now, watching Marcus mirror that same respect, Ellis felt a relay pass forward. The cadet hadn't been told to salute. He'd discovered truth on his own and chosen response anchored in discipline rather than drama. Later that morning, a swaggering first year attempted an impression of the Mop Queen's patrol march outside the armory. His buddies didn't laugh. One muttered, "Knock it off," and pointedly tightened his chin strap. The joker flushed, shrugged, and stomped away. Nobody reported the incident. Peer pressure had pivoted. At 9:30, Ellis stepped into the corridor for coffee. Elena was buffing linoleum near fire doors, bandaged hands steady on the handle. As Ellis passed, she gave the smallest tilt of her head. Acknowledgement, gratitude, camaraderie compressed into one understated motion. Elena paused, eyes meeting Ellis's just long enough for recognition to spark. Then eased the buffer forward. 2 veterans. 1 secret. No words required. Behind them, distant boot heels struck rhythm on the drill pad. Thump, thump, thump. Cadets marching in time they hadn't mastered a week ago. The hush followed with them, unbidden, respectful. Ellis let the door swing closed on the echo and thought, good. Let them learn to carry quiet the way she does. One day, it may be the only shield they have. The range gesture Friday afternoon at Fort Wellington was normally a chorus of shouted range commands, line, make ready. But the closing hour before supper could be strangely quiet. At 4:45 p.m., with Georgia's sun hanging low and crimson beyond ventilation louvers, the indoor pistol complex was almost deserted. The only sound in the lobby was the soft tick of a wall clock and buzz of sodium lights kicking on above concrete lanes. Elena slipped through the side door, as always at week's end, canvas tote hanging from one shoulder. In her right hand, she carried a brittle registration card, edges furled, ink pale brown, that marked her recurring reservation for Lane 6. The range guard on duty, Corporal Martinez, no relation, simply raised his chin in greeting. No clipboard, no signature. He reached over and flipped the switch that lit the far-right firing station. Routine as dependable as sunrise. Elena padded down the center aisle, boots whispering on anti-slip paint. Halfway to her station, she realized this afternoon would not be routine in the strictest sense. 3 cadets occupied shadows behind the left-hand blast shields. Marcus Chen stood nearest, hands clasped behind his back. Beside him, Cadet Lisa Park, jaw set in quiet concentration. Next to her, the usually irrepressible Tyler Brooks, unusually subdued, eyes front. None wore hearing protection. None held firearms. They simply waited. A small honor guard formed without permission. Elena stopped outside Lane 6. Her gaze flicked to the trio, assessing rather than questioning. She saw no phones held up to record, no smirks, no restless shuffling. Whatever had drawn them here was not curiosity of the empty kind. She nodded once, neither invitation nor dismissal, merely confirmation that their presence, for the moment, was acceptable. From the tote, she produced the same Beretta M9 she'd carried for years past its official prime, finish scarred by holster wear and sand. She laid a folded rag across the wooden bench, set the pistol on top, and wiped the slide as if removing prints only she could see. The ritual proceeded. Magazine check, safety glasses, ear protection slipped over her cap. No wasted motion, no theatrical chamber inspection. Each step belonged to ceremony older than the range itself. She squared her stance, feet at 45 degrees, weight balanced, shoulders relaxed like a door left slightly ajar, ready to swing either way. The silhouette target motor clicked, sending paper downrange to the regulation 7-meter mark. She inhaled, letting recycled air fill her lungs the way dust-choked air had once done half a world away, and lifted the Beretta. The first shot cracked. Concrete swallowed the echo. The slug tore paper just a fingertip right of center mass. To the cadets, the round sounded ordinary. The follow-up, a hair slower, punched through the same tier, widening it but not drifting. Third shot, half an inch above, forming an isosceles triangle of ragged black. Elena paused, muzzle angled toward floor, breathing even. She shifted grip, rolled shoulders, resumed. 2 rounds in quick succession, left hand only, each finding the triangle's heart as if magnet drawn. Brief pause. Slide locked back. Her free hand moved without her eyes leaving sights. Magazine out. Fresh one in, slide forward. Last round. Clean shot to the cardboard skull, dead center. 6 rounds. 6 lessons. The entire string had lasted maybe 15 seconds. Behind her, Tyler felt a whistle gather in his chest like steam under a kettle lid. But the look on Marcus's profile, intent, almost reverent. Shut the valve closed. Lisa, arms folded, whispered, That isn't training fire. It feels like memory. Marcus answered with a short nod, eyes never leaving the target that now swung lazily in the motor's return. Elena lowered the pistol, thumbed the safety, and set it on the bench. She stripped the magazine, laid it beside its twin, and reached for her rag again. When the target traveled forward along its track and stopped 2 meters away, the tight cluster of holes seemed hardly larger than a single slug. She studied it with mild detachment, as if confirming a measurement she already knew was correct, and replaced the sheet with fresh paper. The second string differed only in cadence: 3-round burst, 2-round burst, single headshot. But the tempo now matched a fire team's bounding pattern: move, cover, move. To Marcus, the pattern felt eerily like diagrams in their infantry manual. To Elena, it was nothing so abstract. It was a street corner in Naujaf where targets sprang from doorways too fast for thought, where 5 heartbeats had once depended on her not missing. Magazines emptied, she broke stance, stepped back, and let her wrists relax. The smell of burnt powder curled into conditioned air. She ran bore snake through the barrel, dabbed oil along rails, all motions as understated as the firing itself. Twilight leaned through the range's high windows, painting amber bars across concrete and muting every sound to a hush. Elena had fired her last string, cleared the Beretta, and slipped foam plugs from her ears when something unexpected happened. As she wiped slide rails and checked empty magazines, the other cadets, satisfied or humbled, had filtered away without ceremony. Only Marcus remained, hands clasped behind him beside the row of wooden benches that lined the cinder block wall. Metal clicked as Elena seated the pistol in its cloth sleeve. She felt air cooling, smelled cordite fading into the faint odor of hydraulic oil that lived in every range, regardless of country. Something lingered between her and the Cadet, a coil of unfinished circuitry. She closed the zipper and straightened. Marcus stepped forward. From the breast pocket of his field jacket, he withdrew a fresh 50-round box of 9mm, factory tape unbroken, brass flashing beneath clear plastic. He did not present it like tribute. Instead, he laid it square on the bench where Elena always rested her gear, cartridges aligning with the slats as neatly as parade rifles on a rack. His voice rode the stillness rather than disturbed it. "Ma'am, I figure 30 rounds wasn't quite enough today." It was not apology, not flattery. It was logistics offered in the native language of warriors. Ammunition equals respect equals time granted to do work that matters. Elena's head turned by a single degree. The box occupied her vision for half a heartbeat before her gaze met Marcus's. In her eyes, neither softness nor ice, only assessment. The silent weighing of motives that once determined life expectancy on a rooftop half a world away. The verdict manifested as the smallest dip of her chin. Not thank you. Something older, more elemental. Noted and accepted. She returned to her cleaning rag, working oil into the slide with the same measured strokes, as though the extra ammunition was simply another fact of the evening. Sunset at 17:31, winds out of the south, one cadet marching across a fault line into adulthood. Marcus didn't linger for acknowledgement. He backed away 2 paces, offered a quiet "good night, ma'am," and headed for the exit. The automatic doors slid shut behind him. Elena finished the weapon, restored her kit, and finally reached for the box. It was warm from his body heat, taped edges crisp. She slipped it into the tote beside her worn magazines, not to fire tonight, but because gesture mattered. Then she slung the bag over her shoulder and walked the length of empty lanes, lights flickering off behind her as the corporal hit the breaker's panel. When she passed the bench, nothing remained but clean wood. The guard saw the exchange from his counter, saw the box disappear, saw the cadet depart a fraction taller than when he'd entered. He said nothing because some stories could only shrink under narration. He merely logged the range as secure for the night, and watched Elena's silhouette fade into the purpling parade ground beyond the double doors. Out there, cadence drums of evening flag detail echoed faintly. Somewhere, a mess hall bell rang. But in the quiet belly of the range, a single gesture lay suspended. A circle closed, a veteran who spoke through action, a student who answered in kind, and 50 rounds of silent conversation neither would ever bother to translate. The death of mockery, the change spread like sunrise crawling across parade ground asphalt. Slow, inexorable, obvious only once you realize the shadows had vanished. For months, the Cadet's favorite low-effort comedy had been mimicking the grim janitor with battlefield posture. Deep fake baritone, stiff leg shuffle, rifle swapped for broom. The mockery died without funeral. No cadre issued orders. No bulletin reminded them of professionalism. The jokes simply stopped landing. The first silence came when Tyler Brooks, historically the loudest impersonator, caught sight of Elena rounding a stairwell corner. Instead of launching into his humpbacked waddle, he straightened as if a drill sergeant's glare were boring into his spine. Elena passed, eyes forward. Tyler's hands stayed glued to his seams. A day later, a sophomore tried to resurrect the routine outside rifle cages, dragging a mop like a wounded bayonet. Lisa Park murmured, "Not funny anymore." She didn't raise her voice, yet the phrase fell with the weight of an order. The would-be joker let the handle drop, cheeks reddening in a way no push-up punishment could achieve. The corridor swallowed the moment, and the cadence of ridicule was retired. At 6:30, the East Wing hallway still glowed in chill fluorescence when Elena began her first pass with the mop. Cadets moving from barracks to PT stopped cutting across her freshly cleaned strip. They looped wide, boots clicking on dry edges. One by one, they offered nods, not the loose-neck bob reserved for cafeteria workers, but compact acknowledgement exchanged by NCOs during nighttime relief in place. Marcus was always first, posture textbook straight, chin tucked, greeting her with a single dip of the head that suggested both respect and partnership. The cadet behind him copied the motion. The next followed suit. No one explained, but the ritual took hold until even visiting National Guard lieutenants mirrored it, uncertain why they did so, only that it felt required. Midweek, Elena knelt to tighten a loosened bootlace outside the armory. As she bent, an old braided lanyard slipped from her jacket pocket. A dull steel dog tag pendulumed at the end, clinking softly against tile. Miguel Martinez, 06-14 Private Jackson, 19, big-shouldered, prone to speaking before thinking, happened to be nearest. He caught the text in a single glance, eyes widening, then looked sharply away. No questions surfaced. Jackson said nothing at dinner, but the sight etched itself into rumor. There were no embellishments, no tall tales of secret medals, only plain knowledge that the woman they'd once mocked carried her son's battlefield ID close to her pulse. The information moved through the battalion by osmosis, each retelling using quieter tones. By Friday, even the most callous plebes found their gaze sliding downward when Elena walked past, a blush of shame coloring bravado. On the live fire range, instructors noticed a curious uptick in discipline. Cadets began policing each other's trigger squeeze, correcting foot angles, whispering, "Check high elbow," before an NCO could bark. Whenever Elena's cap appeared on the berm horizon, sometimes she paused there, just watching. Rifle stocks subtly realigned. The phenomenon wasn't fear. It felt closer to earning the right not to be an embarrassment in front of someone whose unseen ledger tallied life and death by decimal points. In classrooms, heads that once lolled during theory now stayed upright. Notebooks filled. A corporal asked one dozing student if he was feeling ill. The young man snapped awake, muttered apology, and scribbled with urgent intent. Later, he confessed to a friend, "Can't slack off knowing blood's still on the inside. I'd like to keep it there." Thunderheads rolled over Fort Wellington late on a Tuesday, hammering roofs with southern rain that turned walkways into mirrors. At 5:30 p.m., Elena exited supply with a duffel of solvents and replacement mop heads. The strap had frayed through, forcing her to drag 50 pounds of gear like a wounded pack animal. The corridor's fluorescent glow caught pooled water beneath the bag. making it skid. Before she could shift grip, a first-year cadet sprinted from the stairwell. He didn't ask permission, just knelt, seized the ruined strap, and hefted the load to his own shoulder. "Ma'am, allow me," he said, voice half drowned by rain thrumming on the roof. Elena paused, measuring him. She could have waved him off with habitual economy of a woman long used to carrying too much. Instead, she released the handle precisely when his hand secured full weight. An unspoken contract. Strength offered, strength accepted, debt cleared. The cadet escorted her to the janitorial closet, deposited the bag, and left without waiting for thanks. From that evening on, hands appeared whenever she reached for heavy objects. A door held. A barrel rolled. A warning about a slick patch of floor. Not charity, not pity, recompense. The cadet seemed to believe for months of blindness. For outside observers, the academy remained the same grid of brick barracks and obstacle pits. Yet insiders could feel the difference the way a drummer senses tempo. Instructors stopped lecturing about professionalism. They watched it take root, uncommanded, threading its way into everything. Conversation volume, marksmanship scores, posture during colors. Major Ellis described it best in a memo she never sent. Influence of Martinez, civilian custodian, has produced demonstrable rise in cadet self-regulation. Respect generated through observation rather than instruction. Recommend continued non-interference. Elena read no memos and sought no updates. She only noticed that floors stayed cleaner longer, fewer boot scuffs marred the wax, and silence accompanied her more often than ridicule. When a private held a door, she stepped through without breaking stride. If someone nodded, she nodded back. Face unreadable but pace fractionally lighter. The transformation was neither loud nor sudden, but like a tide, it reshaped the shoreline of daily life at Fort Wellington. Proof that a single current, silent and steady, can redirect an entire sea of voices. The bench conversation the afternoon wore a gentler uniform than the rest of Fort Wellington's week. No rifle cracks, no cadence shouts, just low wind slipping across the gravel walk behind training grounds. A few sun-bleached benches lined the path, each facing empty silhouettes of distant target frames. Elena sat at the farthest bench, where shade from a lone cedar cut diagonal across her boots. She held a dented metal mug, coffee long since cooled to the color of river water. When she lifted it, liquid barely rippled. When she set it down, breeze carried a faint clink that disappeared into the hush. Marcus spotted her as he rounded the corner of the supply shed. He slowed, thumb hooked under his field belt strap, unsure if he was intruding on ritual. The range behind him lay silent in Saturday's stand down, yet the space around Elena felt quieter still, like a chapel raised from dust and spent brass. He gave himself 3 measured breaths, then walked the final 20 yards. Boots crunched once, twice, then found cadence that wouldn't startle anyone already haunted by ghost footsteps. He didn't stop at parade distance. Instead, he lowered himself onto the bench end, leaving respectful gap. No salute, no sir and ma'am dance, just shared wood and wind. Elena didn't greet him, but neither did she drift farther away. Her jacket hem flapped once, revealing the frayed lanyard that carried Miguel's dog tag. The silver rectangle winked before fabric settled. Marcus folded his hands and watched gravel at his toes, letting silence breathe. Minutes passed. 5, maybe 10, counted only by gusts that rattled pine needles overhead. At last, Marcus inhaled, steady but audible. "Have you ever thought," he asked, "about teaching again?" He kept his voice soft, not tentative. When you ask a door whether it wishes to remain closed, you don't pound on the frame. Elena's eyes tracked a line of sunlight crawling across the firing line 50 meters away. She raised the mug, tasted cold coffee without flinching, then lowered it to her knee. "I used to," she said, almost absent-mindedly. "I taught him." The pronoun fell heavy and irrevocable between them. Marcus's throat tightened. He'd read the records. Pictured the moment Miguel's call sign went silent, but hearing her acknowledge it, unguarded, matter of fact, punctured something he hadn't known was still inflated. He resisted reflexes. "I'm sorry, ma'am. He'd be proud of you." Phrases that bounced harmlessly off genuine grief. Instead, he answered with a slow nod that felt like lowering a flag to half-mast. The gesture wasn't for show. It was to prevent unnecessary noise. Elena's gaze lingered on paper silhouettes bleached nearly white by months of sun. The target swayed the slightest degree, as though invisible shooters still breathed down their sights. She wrapped a small square of cloth, maybe an old cleaning patch, around her forefinger and thumb, twisting it in a habit of quiet fidgeting. When she finally spoke again, her voice was air through gravel. "Some things aren't meant to be repeated out loud." Marcus understood that sentence carried more than words. It held images of alleyways under tracer fire, of a mother's hands sealing field dressings while her lungs begged to scream a name she dared not voice. He didn't chase the revelation. Instead, he mirrored her posture, elbows on knees, eyes on distance. A pair of cadets in the far lot practiced bounding drills without rifle fire, their shouts of set and moving, subdued to stage whispers. They paused, noticing the two figures on the bench, then continued even softer, as if an unofficial perimeter of reverence existed. The minutes lengthened. Wind played with Marcus's sleeve tabs. In that space, he became aware of a subtle exchange. A transfer not of information but of weight. The way one climber steadies another on narrow ledge by merely staying close. He felt his earlier hunger to know everything dissolve, replaced by different instinct, to guard what little he'd been trusted with. Elena drew a breath deep enough to move her shoulders. Then she set the mug beside her boot, reached into the inside pocket of her jacket, and drew out a narrow field notebook bound in sun-faded green canvas. Its corners were rounded, elastic band long snapped away. She flipped it open with care a librarian would envy, though pages were already thumb-creased and stained. Sparse handwriting filled each leaf, no sentences, just bullet points. Wind calls, ranges, half schematics of door-breaching angles. Next page, trust the quiet. Glass before gas. When in doubt, kneel. Some lines ended in dates. Some ended in nothing at all. She closed the notebook and extended it toward Marcus. The gesture was understated, but her hand remained until he accepted. He took it with both palms, as though weight alone might betray its value. She did not issue instructions. Her nod, barely a suggestion of vertical movement, signaled that what mattered had already been conveyed. Marcus didn't open the book yet. Instead, he stood, sliding it into the pouch at his chest, normally reserved for a map board. He checked the buckle on his belt, unconscious action telegraphing readiness, then faced her and dipped his head. Not quite a bow, not quite a salute. An act of receiving rather than honoring. When he looked up, she was studying him with neither pride nor sorrow. Only the grave certainty of someone who'd once handed a rifle to her son and watched him stride into ruin. "I'll keep it safe," Marcus said. The promise felt wholly inadequate, so he added, "And I'll use it right." Elena's reply was a breath more than whisper. "That's all it asks." He stepped off the gravel path, boots crunching once, then walked toward the barracks. 2 strides in, he glanced back. The cedar's shadow had lengthened. Elena's profile was a silhouette against pale sky, dog tag glinting, mug raised once again. Marcus pressed the notebook closer to his chest and kept going. Each footfall seemed to strike not just ground, but some new plane of responsibility. Elena watched him until the corner of the maintenance shed swallowed his shape. She let wind move through the gap he left, carrying away the last faint scent of burnt powder from earlier live fire period. The past, she thought, didn't vanish. It redistributed, parceling itself into those willing to bear fragments. She picked up the mug, cold metal against skin, and held it lightly, the way she'd once held a morphine ampule or final spent casing. knowing some objects retained heat long after the flame. In the lull, she heard range flags flapping, boots double-timing on distant track, and muted laughter of young soldiers trying out the harmonies of adulthood. August pressed her jacket back. The braids of the frayed lanyard slapped softly against the dog tag. She closed her hand over it, felt embossed letters under her thumb, Miguel's name, the date, then released it. The tag swung twice, found equilibrium, and lay still. Elena rose, joints quiet from years of discipline. She collected the mug, slipped it into a cargo pocket, and walked the gravel path toward the service wing. The bench behind her kept its imprint. Slight warmth where two sets of shoulders had braced against invisible recoil. On the planks, a single coffee ring dried to a dull circle. Muted evidence of a conversation where almost nothing was said, yet everything that mattered had changed hands. The Memorial Monday dawned with the same grey pre-dawn glow that always seeped through the ranger's clerestory windows. Corporal Stevens unlocked the pistol complex at 5:45 as usual. The air smelled of solvent and stale rubber, lights still flickering to full strength when he keyed in the code that raised blast shutters. Nothing appeared out of order until he reached the central aisle and noticed the security bar on lane 6 edging out a fraction farther than its sisters. He paused. Weekend roasters showed no reservations. The log sheet remained blank. Caution said, verify. He stepped onto the firing line, shoes echoing in the cavernous room, and eased the partition wider. No shooter waited behind the stall, yet someone had been here. On the bench where a battered Beretta often rested lay a slim rectangle of milled metal the size of a dog tag but thicker, edges chamfered by hand. It stood upright, perfectly balanced against the rear lip of the table, as if placed with deliberate care. Stevens's first instinct was to radio the on-call sergeant. Instead, he leaned closer. The front face caught fluorescent glare, dim letters rising out of brushed steel. Silence is survival. The phrase felt neither motto nor threat, just an axiom he'd never heard but somehow believed. He touched it with a fingertip. The engraving was shallow, as if cut with improvised tools rather than machine press. Turning it over, he found a second inscription, smaller, cleaner. MG lost during I care. You still see MG Miguel Grant. The date. Stevens wasn't privy to details, but rumor of the fallen son had trickled even to the guard rotation. He set the tag back exactly as it had been and backed away, pulse weirdly elevated. Empty or not, the lane now felt occupied. Word traveled at the speed of curiosity. By 7:00 a.m., half a dozen cadets had drifted into the range under guise of early technique drills. They congregated behind the firing line, conversation hushed. No one crossed the threshold of lane 6. They simply regarded the tag from just outside the border, the way museum visitors respect velvet rope. Marcus arrived midway through the quiet gathering and threaded past shoulders until he faced the bench. He let his hand settle on the oak rail, then reached, not to take, only to touch, thumb brushing one corner as if confirming reality. The metal was cool, heavier than its size suggested. Behind him, Tyler spoke in a low rasp. She left that. Marcus's head tilted, eyes never leaving the piece. Not left, he murmured. Entrusted. The distinction landed with more resonance than explanation. A first-year cadet whispered, "Shouldn't we turn it in? Chain of command?" No one answered because everyone understood the chain of command here was unspoken, older than any posted SOP. Major Ellis, arriving on silent shoes, confirmed it. When she appeared at Marcus's elbow, took one long look, and simply nodded. Let it stand. Log shows the lane is reserved. No official plaque identified what the tag signified. No rank, unit patch, or campaign stamped in regulation font. Yet anyone who had watched Elena fire, or mop, or simply exist could translate its language. Persistence, grief, unfinished duty. It was not farewell. She had reported for work that morning like any other, pushing a cart through Bravo corridor while Cadet straightened reflexively. The tag was her signature, Left on the one place, she shed anonymity, a message to those who had chosen to see her. Lisa tucked loose hair under her patrol cap and spoke to no one in particular. We should mark the line so nobody steps past it by accident. She produced a roll of engineered tape from a cargo pocket, white like range safety, but tore a length only a foot long. Marcus helped press it to concrete exactly at the stall threshold, sealing down the ends so it wouldn't peel. No words, no arrows. Just a thin border saying, inside this space, pay attention. For the rest of the shift, Lane 6 remained dark, its overhead lamp purposely left off to keep glare off the tag. Shooters took other stations without complaint. Whenever a new trio entered, someone briefed them in whispers. No firing there today. The hush that had once followed Alina herself now attached to the small steel token, radiating outward. Near midday, a supply clerk stopped by with a clipboard, but halted when he saw the informal vigil. He scribbled a note, backed away, and left undelivered ammo at the doorway instead of crossing in. In the auditorium of concrete and lead dust, usually alive with small arms thunder, held a gentler echo, as if the ceiling baffles refused to reflect anything louder than necessary. Around 3:00 p.m., Major Ellis returned with a clear acrylic case, the kind used for retiring flag streamers. She offered it to Marcus. Just until we figure a permanent mount. But Marcus shook his head. She placed it bare. I think it stays that way. Ellis studied him a moment, then capped the box under her arm and departed without further argument. Evening brought final relay. Stevens logged closing procedures, but left the lane open on his checklist. Station 6 honorary status pending. He clicked off overheads one by one, feeders whirring to silence, and paused before flipping the breaker for lane 6. The tag caught the last shard of light like a low star. He left the lamp glowing. Outside, sunset cast long bars across the parade ground, and boot scuffs traced their own private vows in rooms and racks and rifles. The cadets carried forward the sentence etched in steel, 4 syllables, 1 equation. Silence is survival. Enough said, and more than enough to remember. The legacy lives on a month slipped by after the morning the metal tag appeared, and the range settled into new rhythms. Elena still walked corridors with her mop at dawn, still inspected supply shelves, still answered the quartermaster's dry remarks with nods that broke no rhythm. But lane 6 remained conspicuously vacant. No one saw her pass the plexiglass doors after hours, Beretta in tow. No faint thunder of the familiar 3-2-1 cadence echoed down the concrete tube. She had withdrawn from the stall the way a receding tide leaves polished stones behind. Everyone noticed. No one intruded. The cadets understood by then that when Elena wrapped silence around something, it functioned as a perimeter. Lieutenant Rodriguez, range officer and the same guard who had first granted her those unlogged evenings, kept quiet eye on the vacancy. Rodriguez was not sentimental by nature. He judged shooters by groupings and staff by punctuality. Yet each afternoon when he checked firing line readiness, the sight of lane 6, dark and immaculate, stirred unease he couldn't annotate on a maintenance form. One Wednesday, as he locked the ammo cage, he caught Marcus pausing outside the stall. The cadet merely tilted his head once, as if listening for a heartbeat in wood, then moved on. That silent exchange convinced Rodriguez an unspoken policy already existed. He decided to give it shape. The next day, Rodriguez contacted an engraver friend downtown. He slid a scrap of notebook paper across the counter. A single sentence and a request for a brass plate no larger than a field dressing packet. He paid cash, asked for no receipt, and picked up the finished piece 3 nights later. Letters darkened by acid wash, corners smoothed so careless hands wouldn't snag. Early Saturday, just after reveille but before first relay arrived, Rodriguez entered the empty range carrying a stubby screwdriver and 4 slim screws. Lane 6's bench was tempting, but he remembered Elena's preference for standing, firing line clean except for a rag and single thermos. So he crossed to lane 4, the one she'd used before staff installed new ventilation, and knelt at the rear corner of the wooden deck. 4 turns per screw, maple splintering softly under pressure. The brass flashed in fluorescent glow, then dulled as fingerprints clouded it. When he stepped back, the plate read, "Reserved until she says otherwise." No ceremony, no clipboard entry. Rodriguez wiped stray sawdust from the floor, pocketed the driver, and flicked on ready lights for remaining lanes. Sunday's first shooters were an ROTC trio prepping for drill evaluation. They chatted about trigger weight until one noticed the glinting rectangle. Conversation tapered. They re-racked their pistols, skipped lane 4, and set up on the opposite side without comment. Word traveled faster than mass text. The range now held 23 lanes for everyone else, and 1 lane for the keeper of quiet. By midweek, the plaque exerted its own gravity. Cadets who had never met Alina found themselves whispering near it, sensing boundary older than they were. No one posted rules, yet spent casings never littered that floor. The janitorial cart bypassed it at night, as though cleaning fluids might erase a signature etched deeper than brass. The tag in lane 6 remained, steel on oak, its lone sentence traveling the facility like echo in wiring. Silence is survival. One evening, Major Ellis strolled through during a lull, hands clasped behind her back. She paused before the plate, read it twice, and allowed a faint smile to crease weather-worn cheeks. "Good call, Rodriguez," she murmured, though Rodriguez wasn't present. Ellis reached out, not to touch, but to measure space between letters the way a jeweler gauges gems. Then she moved on, leaving brass to catch range lights and throw warm reflection onto the floor. Alina never mentioned the change. If she knew, and surely she did, she gave no outward sign. But those who watched closely thought her shoulders rode a hair lower, the kind of ease a sentry allows only when another guard takes post. When she passed the lobby window each afternoon, Rodriguez's clerk noticed her glance once toward the lanes. Not longing, not regret. Merely confirmation. The circle held. There were whispers, naturally. A visiting gunnery sergeant asked why the 4th stall sat dark. Cadet Jackson, now wiser, answered, "Reserved for someone who's already qualified, Sergeant." The sergeant let it rest. Another week, a civilian contractor looking for extra range time gestured at the empty lane. Tyler shook his head. "Off limits, sir. Range reservation." "Not exactly," Tyler said, choosing words like a man packing explosives. "It's historical." The contractor shrugged and took lane 10. Because the plaque bore no name, it granted privacy even as it conferred honor. Anyone could sense significance. Only a few new details, and those few guarded them the way a squad guards radio frequencies. The absence of biography made the stall untouchable. Students could not spin tall tales. Instructors could not reduce meaning to PowerPoint bullets. It simply was like a battlefield cross planted where comrades fell. Some evenings Marcus lingered by the lane after closing, studying the way brass caught low light. He never crossed inside. Instead, he left small tributes that vanished by morning. A perfectly coiled target paster roll, cleaned adhesive gunk, a length of paracord braided into tidy loop. None remained 24 hours, yet he continued to bring them, gestures timed with inner milestones. First perfect score on combat pistol course. First after-action review where he'd corrected a peer's sight alignment without sarcasm. He understood that gratitude, like ammunition, carried weight even when expended silently. Eventually, a training inspector from brigade headquarters toured the facility. She noticed the unused lane and frowned over efficiency metrics. Lieutenant Rodriguez accompanied her, explaining with few words that the station was reserved for legacy demonstration. The inspector raised an eyebrow but recorded no deficiency. Something in the hush of the room, in the slack absence of dust on that one firing line, convinced her to allocate scrutiny elsewhere. Thus the brass plate became a fixed star in the small universe of Fort Wellington. New cadets learned of it during orientation, not from manuals, but from subtle body language of upper years who guided them around its orbit. The echo of Elena's cadence lingered in the rafters. The tag's inscription whispered over each shooter's shoulder, and the plaque said what everyone had come to accept. That respect required no megaphone, valor required no headline, and some lanes belonged forever to the quietest voice in the building. In the end, the reservation stood uncontested because the absence underneath it spoke louder than a name. A blank space that every cadet, every instructor, every passerby filled with their own definition of worth, and then chose to leave untouched. Not everyone who has waited through war feels compelled to speak of it. Elena Martinez never did. She carried no deployment patch, never opened Efteractian slideshows in conference rooms, never lingered near the Valor Wall where visiting veterans pinned campaign ribbons to felt. She avoided the word veteran the way a sapper avoids tripwire, calmly, precisely, instinctively. Whatever mattered most about those sand-scored days had long since soldered itself into bone and breath, beyond the reach of casual conversation. Those who possessed enough perception felt the gravity of that silence and adjusted themselves accordingly. Those who lacked it earned neither resentment nor correction, merely indifference. She had learned, somewhere between first insertion and last extraction, that the truest things rarely survive translation into words. Through all her seasons at the academy, she never introduced herself as anything but Martinez. No rank, no branch, no hint of medals refused. If a visiting colonel tried small talk about her previous employment, she lifted one shoulder in a gesture that meant irrelevant. She didn't mention the platoon she had once shepherded through burning streets, or the son whose single dog tag now rode a frayed lanyard in her pocket, or the commendations she had declined because the only person whose opinion mattered lay beneath white marble stone. She existed like masonry, load-bearing, mostly unnoticed, ready to anchor the building but uninterested in signage. Because she never supplied a story, every observer had to decide whether to dismiss her or work to deserve the knowledge she withheld. In that quiet test, they often discovered more about themselves than about her. Her lessons therefore manifested in motion rather than explanation. Each shot she fired on the range told a paragraph about cadence, about breath control, about the moral necessity of never wasting a round that might yet save someone. Watching her, cadets realized that stance was conviction made visible. The square feet, settled shoulders, trigger squeeze that refused to flinch even at memory's ghosts. Even the slow, symmetrical strokes of her mop-delivered curriculum. Precision without hurry. Discipline without trumpet fanfare. Diligence that asked no audience. To the untrained eye, it was janitorial routine. To anyone tuned to nuance, it was a living field manual on endurance, meticulousness, and the fragile dignity of work well done. No slides, no laser pointer, only perfect consistency between unspoken ethic and the next deliberate action. The agents of mockery who once stalked behind her became, over time, curators of her silence. Tyler, formerly ringmaster of every broom-handle parody, now posted himself at the entrance to Lane 4 each dawn, ensuring the stall remained undisturbed before first relay. No order detailed that duty. He reported because conscience did. Lisa evolved into the soft-voiced marshal of hallways, her gentle keep it down. Martinez coming through, taming conversations the moment rubber wheels squeaked on tile. And Marcus, who had first spotted the faded tattoo under bright warehouse light, kept the metal tag locked in his wall locker, wrapped in a square of lint-free cloth. He showed no one, not even Tyler, yet its presence influenced the way he signed equipment logs and the way he corrected younger cadets, sparingly, firmly, always in the tone of someone who knows a single sentence can carry a lifetime's weight. So if you ever cross paths with someone like Elena, resist the reflex to pry at their story. Do not hurry through awkward silence to fill it with polite awe. Watch instead. Note how they pace their breathing when tension creeps in. How they survey exits before choosing a seat. How they decline the podium in favor of the back row, where they can see the whole room. They will seldom ask for recognition, but they deserve the courtesy of your patience. Because every measured nod and every deliberate step is fluent in a language earned the hardest way. Elena belongs to that uncanonicized cadre, warriors who tuck the war inside work boots and janitor's gloves, who let achievements evaporate rather than take on the sour smell of boast. Their lives insist that humility is not the opposite of greatness. It is the vessel that keeps greatness from rotting in open air. And if fortune grants you time beside such a person, whether on a firing line, factory floor, or midnight bus, listen for what is not said. You may walk away with no dates, no battle names, no statistics to brag about. Instead, you will carry the echo of discipline practiced alone in empty rooms, and the realization that valor can choose to hide rather than shine. That lesson, taken seriously, will recalibrate your idea of legacy. It is not what the world records, but what quietly endures. Lane reserved until the rightful owner decides otherwise. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.